Yo, what's going on today, guys? You already know what the vibes are. I'm here to give you guys the best deck list for ranked. For those of you who might be new to the channel, I ended up around the top 300 range last season. Currently like top 4,000 this season, not grinding as much, but I'm also a previous tournament winners. Got some belts, bro, from back in the day, even if I'm a little bit rusty now. Yeah, so the first deck is going to be the one I just talked about on my channel, which is going to be Tapu Koko, Oricorio, Zorora, and Arceus. So this deck has been doing pretty decent in tournaments, like recently in the current Arceus day. If we look at the standings, I think it got like 11th or something like that, or like in the top 20. Yeah, it got exactly 20th. It's just a very strong deck because of the current meta. And the main reason is because, especially in ranked, the #1 most used deck right now is going to be that Sylveon Charizard deck. Sylveon Charizard takes absolutely no skill. Obviously, in certain scenarios it does, but it's just such a turn off the brain and play a bunch of games deck, which is very good for the new win streak bonus in ranked. So that's why a lot of the top players, the #1 guys using Charizard, the #2 guy, like all the people in like the top 100, a majority of them are just using Charizard, which Oricorio takes advantage of because they only have that one answer, which is going to be Flareon. So if that Flareon tries to come in, you can just, you can just deal with it, bro. You just knock out the Flareon. The Charizard can't do anything about you. And especially if you get like an early KO, like going first, like Zorora, bro, you always have that Geo potential if they don't have that giant cape. Or, just attacking twice, sometimes if they do brick, is just such a good option. You have the Donge, you have the Arceus for like the high 130 damage. You have the Tapu Koko in like certain decks as well to go like aggressive if you go second for the 90 damage. This deck just kind of has like everything it needs. So like, it's just, dude, it's just really get in the meta. Like you have so much room, so you could have like PCL, Geos, Dons, and then you even have the 2 electrical cords and the giant cape. So I just played this deck the other day. I played like 10 games overall, and like where I am, like top 4,000 range, it felt very good. Like I faced against like 4 Charizards. They just couldn't do anything. Like the deck just like Oricorio was just so broken. And then they have like the different switch ons. You have like the Oricorio where you could stall build up the Arceus, or you have like the aggressive Tapu Koko, bro. It's just a really good mix of like synergy in the deck, and it's just you have like a bunch of different ways to take advantage of like different decks, bro, just because you have those different modes. Anyways, like moving on to the next Oricorio deck, because I'm just gonna show off all the best Oricorio decks just because I think it's just Oricorio is just extremely broken. We have like the tried and true. So Silvally Oricorio Zorora, bro, is a deck that was pretty decent last meta. Like it was definitely like an A tier deck. I think it's like now, like, dude, it's just really strong as like an S tier deck. And that's mainly just for the same reasons. I mean, Oricorio I think is just way better than last season, because like last season we had more Silvally decks in the rotation. Now we really only have like this and then Silvally Rampardos, which we will get into later. But yeah, so we just have Silvally, for the 100 damage. Silvally going second is just extremely powerful. You have Zorora and then you have Oricorio. Zorora is obviously nice because, Silvally does take 2 energy. Like it's very nice to have something in the back, or even if you go first to be able to start attacking. Then you just have like the Oricorio's Assault on these EX decks. And then this version is running 2 Geos. Obviously, like I said, almost in every single like best decks, like the support ratios can change. If you want to take something out, like if you want to take a Geo out and then you want to add something else, I don't know what support card, like off the top of my head, you would add. Like maybe you want an Iona or something, bro, just because why not? Like go ahead. Obviously, like you'd always change these ratios if something isn't working for you, if you want something else. But yeah, it's just one of those, it's just like a faster, aggressive version of Oricorio. So the next Oricorio deck that's been popping up is Luxray. So like I said, a lot of these decks at the top meta only have one answer to Oricorio because a lot of them are very EX heavy. So the reason Luxray is being played, not only do you have like energy generation with Volkner, so you don't necessarily have to attach like the energy to Luxray. You could always like retreat something and then obviously use Volkner to be able to go into Luxray early. And obviously the cool thing about Volkner over Lusamine is that Volkner, you don't actually have to have one of your Pokemon die to be like before using it. So Luxray can snipe 120 damage in the back. Almost all the answers to deal with Oricorio in these decks, such as these Magernias, these Flareons, they all have under 120 HP or 120 HP exactly. So if you use Luxray to snipe something in the back that can deal with the Oricorio and then your opponent has nothing else to deal with it, it's just a GG's from there. So that's the reason like Luxray is like mainly being played, just because it does snipe the bad, like the 1 or 2 cards that might actually deal with Oricorio in these certain decks. Not only that, but like even just you just 120 damage due to the bench is just extremely powerful if they try to retreat out. I mean, we already saw how good the Decidueye was in previous seasons, you know, when it was meta relevant. So, yeah, I mean, it just kind of, you know, does its thing. Plus, it's electric, so it synergizes with the Oricorio plus Aurora package. Besides that, you know, you just have Guzma because this version, you know, like Guzma is, I think, a card that a lot of Oricorio decks should be playing, and it's like a lot of the like Oricorio decks are not using it as of now. But I do suggest actually with these two previous decks as well. Like I think one Giovanni and then one Guzma honestly might be better. Maybe not for the Silvally deck, just because you do have the Silvally anyways. Like you probably might not need it because, you know, you're not only solely relying on Oricorio. But I think like maybe like even just taking out one electrical core, putting a Guzma in here would be pretty good, just because Darkrai Giratina with the Rocky helmets are making its way back in the meta, which I will talk about later. But essentially, you just don't want your Oricorio to be able to like take an extra damage, you know, because if a deck's only way to deal with this is like a Poison Barb or a Rocky Helmet, you definitely want to get rid of that as fast as possible. And then the last one is just the same. It's just the Oricorio Greninja Sylveon Giratina version. So this is mostly used for like electric and water, just so you can't attack with Oricorio. I've seen some builds like, you know, switching it up, like attacking using like water Psychic and just having Oricorio as like a stall tool. Or even stuff like electric Psychic, you know, not attack with Greninjas. You know, I think probably like electric water is probably better overall, because you definitely want to attack with Greninja. And then, you know, Oricorio is attacking like is nice. You only have one Sylveon, like you don't really need to attack of Sylveon. Plus, you know, Giratina just ramps itself up. Obviously, if you do play Psychic, you could ramp up Giratina faster. But besides that, you have like the one red card, one giant cape. This deck like traditionally plays one Irida just because you have the Oricorio to let it live longer. Like I think two Cyruses is still broken, so if you do want to take out like an Irida, play a Cyrus, or maybe you don't need two hand disruptions, like maybe you're like, okay, well the red card or the Mars is good enough, I only need one of them. You can definitely just take one of them out, put the Cyrus in. If you want to play two Cyruses, because I think two Cyruses is extremely broken with Greninja. So, you know, obviously it's personal preference at the end of the day. But yeah, these are going to be the 4 best Oricorio decks. This one is just, it's just the Greninja Giratina deck, bro, just with Oricorio to be able to beat those. Because like, I think like Charizard like probably does beat this deck if you're playing Oricorio. With the Oricorio, you actually have a chance against that deck, which I think is just cool. So yeah, I think Oricorio is just very dominant right now, as we're seeing these 4 meta relevant decks playing it. And yeah, I guess we'd actually move on to the non-Oricorio decks now. So Sylveon Greninja is obviously the best deck in the game, probably currently. It's the best deck in the game, but I do want to say this meta is pretty diverse. So like while it is strong, it's not like where like Buzzwole was last season, where like Buzzwole was like here and then I feel like the next deck was here. I don't think that's the case of Sylveon. I think there are decks that are good against it, and I don't think it's like too dominant, but I still kind of value it at the best deck in the game, just because at least in tournament play it is getting the most amount of wins. It's just seeing the most amount of overall success in my, like, from what I've seen personally. In ranked, a little bit different story, because, you know, there are like the ranked in tournament meta is different. I still think it's a very strong deck. I still think you can kind of like beat any deck with this. Zard might be a bad matchup, but you just have the Greninja pings, the Sylveon dude for the draw power. You just have everything to be able to deal with everything. And it's just the same Sylveon Greninja that I've been talking about. Some builds have been taking out red card, turn on Mars, stuff like that. Some of it even been taking out Pokecom for like red card and Mars. So you could have like double hand disruption. Some of them are playing Irida, some of them are playing Iono. Like I said, bro, very customizable. Those are like the 2 flex slots, like the red card and the Pokecom are like the 2 flex slots. You can kind of like play whatever you want depending on like how you like to play the game. So that's just something to note. Like we could even just like look at the top cut from the last Ursees, which is obviously the biggest tournament of the week. One, you can see 5th, bro. You can just see down here, Brad, there's just a bunch of Sylveon Greninjas like scattered around. It's just Sylveon as other decks, but I think Sylveon Greninja, just from like looking at it, is probably like the most represented deck, along with like Silvally Oricorio / Charizard probably. So yeah, it's just probably still the best deck in the meta. Speaking about the most dominant deck actually, and the most played deck, definitely not the best, because it does have that weakness to Oricorio, although you do have the Flareon. It's going to be Charizard Sylveon. So Charizard was a pretty decent deck last season with Silvally, because, you know, it countered Buzzwole. With the addition of Sylveon just being able to let's use Turbo out Charizard, it's the reason it's the most played deck. Is very consistent. Obviously, you know, at the end of the day, you could still break out the rare candies and even the Sylveon, even with the draw power of Eevee. But the deck just have everything. But you have the 2 lilies, you have the giant cape. I have seen some builds taking out stuff. I forget exactly what they're taking out, but I've seen builds running an X speed or a potion to be able to, you know, swap in the Charizard faster in case you go first and you start with Eevee, but you actually end up drawing all the stuff. And the potion is nice. I forget specifically why, but like a potion plus a Lily lets you live something. I literally cannot remember exactly what it was. It might be a Solgaleo attack, but that is something to note. But yeah, it's just Charizard, the draw Eevee, the Sylveon, then you have the Flareon literally just for Oricorio. So like I was talking about, like if you're playing against the Luxray, and the Luxray, like let's say you're facing against a Luxray or Oricorio, and let's say you have a Sylveon already because you needed the draws to go into Charizard. Let's say you only have one Eevee left. If that Luxray snipes your Eevee and you only have a, like, you just lose because it's double Oricorio most likely. So, you know, you actually have to pay attention and like not let that Eevee die if you do need to go in the Flareon. And you need to like know when to swap in because you can soak multiple times if an Oricorio is in the spot. Be able to retreat out and then attack a Flareon, so your Flareon doesn't take any damage. And then when you retreat Flareon back out, you can attack a Zard right away. So just remember all that stuff. And like, I think because Zard is so meta relevant right now, if you're playing a deck that cannot beat this deck, I just don't think you should be playing it. I think this deck also kind of like took out Solgaleo, just because I feel like why would you play Solgaleo when you could just play Stoke Zard? Okay, so I did say Solgaleo was definitely worse because Zard is probably the most played deck. In Oricorio decks, there's just so many of them. It's still alright, it can still be good, and you can still go on streaks as long as you don't fight those decks. This is probably a deck that is better off like early Master Ball and then even Ultra Ball. Unless you are seeing Oricorio, then Zard just hop off this. But the number one player, Sigun, I think I pronounced that right, who is currently at 5,000 points. This is at the list that they posted on Twitter. So basically everybody kind of just drops Phonetic. Everyone's just playing Sylveon now. And they also dropped the middle evolution. They just want to turbo out Solgaleo, get that rare candy in Solgaleo as fast as possible. And then even though this deck loses to Oricorio, they were playing the Greninja just because Oricorio was so dominant. So this is the list they were using. Solgaleo can still be a good deck. And the leftover is actually very good because if you think about it, Zard can do 170 damage to you. Zard, some decks play red, most of them don't. So if you have the leftovers, Solgaleo attacks, it goes back to 180 HP because basically the downside of its attack to do 10 damage with the leftovers is basically neutralized. So the Zard actually cannot one-shot you. So that is something very good in that matchup, which was previously just almost unwinnable unless you had a giant cape. You know, like Guzma is nice to get, like, allow you to like get these giant capes off of Oricorios and stuff, so Greninja can actually one-shot them. You have the red for that extra damage, you know, the lead to heal up the Solgaleo. Sabrina is also nice as another way to get around. Either get a nice kill on something they are setting up in the back, or, you know, just get around an Oricorio at the end of the day. So Solgaleo, not as strong as it was at the beginning of the season, but it still can be a very competent deck. We also still have the pure Eevee deck. So I think the pure Eevee deck has been doing very good in tournaments. It's also pretty decent in ranked. The downside of this deck does very bad. It is very, very bad in the Charizard. If they can get an early Charizard, and especially if you go first, I think that matchup is probably almost unwinnable if you go first and they get Zard in like the first 1 or 2 turns. Unless you somehow have like a Flareon in the active with a giant cape to stall. But it is still a very good deck against everything else. It's good against the Sylveon Greninja decks. It's good against Solgaleo. It's good against Buzzwole. It's good against every deck that is just not Charizard. So it's just a pure Eevee deck. You have the draw one, and then you have the obviously Eevee EX. You have the 2 Flareons, the 2 Leafeons. So you also have the non-EX Leafeon. This is a way to deal for Oricorio. You could use Leafeon EX to charge it up because this is a pure fire deck. And then you just have that copy of Sylveon for that extra Professor Research essentially. And then, you know, Sabrina, Mars, Red, Giant Cape, the 2 Eevee bags. This deck is very powerful, and because you do have the aggressive Leafeon, bro, like going second, like Eevee EX and the Leafeon, bro, can be very aggressive. It's a very good streaking deck. It's also just very consistent because, you know, everything's an Eevee, bro. Everything evolves from an Eevee. So it's probably like one of the most consistent decks out there. So next up we have Garchomp, Rampardos, Sylveon. So I played this deck a lot. I had the 10 win streak. I've had a lot of success with this deck. So the main flaw of this deck is this deck does good against every deck but Charizard. It's like basically the same situation as the Eevee box deck. And the reason it is because Garchomp only does 50 damage to Zard, and even 100 is not that much, especially with Lilies. Like, you're not going to be able to 2-shot it. So you basically, in that matchup, you need an early Rampardos to do heavy damage to the thing, and then like charge up a Garchomp. You need to basically go second, bro, and then like, you just knock out the dude before they evolve. That is the main way to win. Or you could like knock out something, use Rampardos to do heavy damage to Sylveon, and then let Garchomp snipe it to death. Just because, you know, Garchomp will usually live a hit from Charizard. But yeah, it's just good, dude. I mean, you have the, obviously everybody knows how powerful Rampardos is. It can do very good into these Oricorio decks just because they are always weak to fighting. And then even if you don't have Rampardos, you could like evolve into Bite. This one has a Dragon Gibble. I actually recommend. I kind of changed that. I originally I was using the Dragon Gibble, but nobody really plays. Like Buzzwole is still being played. You don't see it that often, and it's already a bad matchup. So like, just play the fighting one because you just have better matchups than like every other thing. And if you run into a Cortana, Brad, it's GG's. Kind of just accept the L because like chances are, unless you God Over, you're not winning that matchup anyways. And like, or unless you're like opponent like Bricks or something. So definitely play the fighting Gibble. Definitely recommend it overall. And yeah, like I said, Brett's very powerful. The two bad matchups are like Buzzwole, which isn't really played that much because of Zard, even though Buzzwole is still a strong deck. And then it kind of has a rough matchup in the Zard if you don't God Roll. Next up, speaking of Buzzwole, bro, Buzzwole is still very strong. It's the same thing as almost every of these decks. These decks just struggle against Zard. So this one is the one that did the best of the Ursies. You know, Buzzwole is weird because there's so many different ways to play Buzzwole. Like some of them play one Pheromosa, two Cortana, some of them play 1/1. This is just a sample list, and you know, like some play two Uricas, some don't. I think the Guzma is nice, but I thought Buzzwole was top tier. I was getting called crazy, but the number one player, Seagoon, even put in their tier list that they still think Buzzwole is an S tier deck, and I kind of agree with that as well. I thought I was crazy, bro. But this deck has everything. It's good against Sylveon Greninja. You know, you have Cortana and Pheromosas to get around the Oricorios, to just knock them out. Because, you know, you get like Pheromosa something in the back, be able to pull it in a Buzzwole, and then you don't even have to deal with the Oricorio, especially if it's an EX Pokemon. But like I said, the main thing is just it loses the Zard. Buzzwole is still a deck that has everything. You have Lucamine, you have the Cyruses, you have the Bent Snipes. The only downside of Buzzwole existing now is it's not at that top tier that it used to be because there are cards that counter Char. One, just Charizard is better, which was the main counter last season. And then two, we actually have Flareon, bro, which is a huge counter. As Flareon, you know, does 150 damage to it. With the Eevee bags, it can easily one-shot it even with a Leaf Cape. So yeah, I think Buzzwole is still a fine deck to play. Kind of just depends, like if you're not running into those Zards, can be a very fine deck to play. If you're running into the Zards, probably just switch to an Oricorio deck. It's just one of those decks that it just has everything, bro. You just basically have to pray to not run into that bad matchup. So another deck that is still decent is going to be Guzzlord and Helgo. This actually has been doing pretty decent at tournaments, bro. I think it's way better because of the absence of Buzzwole, which was the worst matchup previously. And Guzzlord is actually very good in the Zard. I mean, Zard can't one-shot you. Most of them don't play red. Some of them do, so you always have to be careful. But I mean, if you could just charge Guzzlord up, bro, you have the Celestillas and other matchups to take hits. Like against the Volley, Celestilla is very good to take a hit. You have Nihilego with the Poison Barbs. Some people are still playing Poipole Nagano. I actually saw someone on Twitter post earlier that they got into the 2700s playing Poipole and Nagano, which is the deck that I played last season. So there was a list I saw on Twitter using this with Nagano again, the 2700. I think it's still powerful. I mean, I think Poipole Nagano is still very strong. I think this deck is just probably more consistent because you don't have to rely on that early Poipole / Nagano. But I think either way is fine. If you did want to add two Poipoles and a Nagano, what they did, they actually cut out a Celestilla. So they were playing two Nihilgos, two Poipoles, two Naganos. They cut out a Celestilla and a Guzzlord. And they basically just, you know, took out that stuff to have more support cards. So that is something you could be interested in if you want to find it. It's probably somewhere on Twitter brand or like the Pokemon hashtags. But yeah, I mean, Guzzlord is just, Guzzlord is still good against the Volleys. You have Nihilego with the poison to be able to deal with Oricorios. It's pretty good against Zard because not only can you Ground Core to prevent them from attacking in like very, like if you kind of like don't have another play, you can always Ground Core them, get rid of an energy, give yourself another turn in the stall. But your worst matchup is just less played. It also is pretty bad in the Sylveon Greninja, and that's mainly just because they can, you know, snipe your Guzzlord and then bring in a Cyrus of Giratina. But that's the nice thing about the Naganel version is you do have the access to the Pokemon Center Lady to buy you like one more turn. Okay, so for the final best deck, is going to be Darkrai Giratina. People have been realizing, not only have I just been seeing this deck in ranked a lot, I've actually been facing against Darkrai Giratina almost. I feel like it kind of feels like I'm back in the very first season of ranked. I've been playing against this a decent amount. People have realized you don't need the Nihilego, you don't need the Poison Barbs. No Oricorio deck is really running Guzma, so just slap two Rocky Helmets, bro, and then you can just deal with that because you have, you know, Pokemon Center Lady and then the potions. So it's just Darkrai Giratina, man. Darkrai Giratina can be Zard. You know, you have the setups, you have the giant capes to let Darkrai live a Charizard attack, and it's just kind of good against everything else, bro. It's just very consistent. It's just doing what Darkrai Giratina has been doing for the last couple seasons. You have 2 million support cards, so you always have, you know, so many options available to you in different scenarios. You only have 4 basic Pokemon, you only have 4 EX, you have 4 Pokemon, and you guaranteed one of them. Just get a Pokeball, get the other one, you're perfect, bro. Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of people just playing Darkrai Giratina now, man, and it's just the deck is not, this deck's not broken like it used to be. There's stuff that counters the deck, so I'm totally fine with it coming back in the meta. Is it still annoying to fight against, especially when they get like, dude, out of game earlier, they started double Darkrai Giratina and they had 2 Rocky Helmets, so there's like no, and I didn't have a Guzma in my deck because that was my fault, because I didn't respect this deck enough. I'm definitely putting Guzma in almost all my decks now because of this deck, probably, just for the foreseeable future, especially if it is going to be played like one of the most represented decks, along with like, I think the decks I see the most are this, Zard, and Sylveon Greninja. But like I said, bro, it's just doing the same thing it's been doing, bro. It's consistent. It's just consistent. It's a good deck, and it's just that deck that does not die. So for the final deck, I will mention it. I just don't think this deck is as good as it was. Like, obviously, it's very good in the Oricorio decks, don't get me wrong, but it is just very bad in the Zard. Unless you high roll like double Rampardos or something, or they just don't have lilies, you're kind of not going to be able to deal with that deck. But I wanted to mention it. I still think it is powerful. This guy chose to run an Iono. This is the one that did the best in the Ursies. You know, I've seen so many variants of this deck. Obviously, you know, Iono is very good for the Skull Fossils and stuff. That's why the majority of them play it. I've seen builds not run it and just pray to draw the Skull Fossil. But I think it's a very strong deck still. I wanted to mention it because it's like, I think it's like the last deck that I would mention, that I would recommend people playing. And yeah, I think that's just the final deck. Like I said, bro, it's good against like everything. It's just Silvally, the power of Silvally and Rampardos combined. Like, it's bad against Buzzwole, it's bad against like Guzz, and it's bad against like Zard, but like other decks, you know, it's pretty fine against. And like probably Soul, but like Soul's not played that much. But I still want to mention it, Brad, because it is still a very strong deck. Yeah, so anyways, I think that does it for the best decks. Like, these are all the decks that if I was playing ranked right now, I would be using, and these are also the ones that I see in the top 1000 being used the most. There are some other decks that I probably didn't mention, but I just think these are the best of the best. Like, you could say Magnezone or Oricorio, and I think it's a good deck. It's just like, I don't know, dude. It's like, I'm not seeing it. I think it's also less consistent than the other ones because, you know, you are playing a stage 3 Pokemon. And I know when I was talking about Zard, I said, if your deck doesn't beat Zard, you probably should not be playing it. What I basically mean by that is if it's unwinnable for you to beat Zard. Obviously, there's a lot of times Zard, even if you have a good matchup, Zard could just high roll and beat you anyways. And like, even if your deck, like for example, Buzzwole does not beat Zard, it doesn't mean you should not be playing Buzzwole. Because last season I played Guzzlord. Buzzwole was the most played deck by way more than Zard is. I just stuck it out of Guzzlord because Guzzlord beat every other deck in the meta. So if you have a deck that beats every other deck, but you do lose the Zard, you can definitely still play that deck. It's just if you queue up and you run into like 5 Zards in a row, might be time to switch to a different deck just until the Zard players kind of go away. You know, queuing sometimes is luck. Like sometimes you just get a good matchup, sometimes you have a whole day where you just queuing the 25 Zards maybe, bro, in a row. But anyways, I think that is it for the video. I hope you guys can take these lists and get to either Ultra Ball, bro, Master Ball for the first time, which is a very big achievement. Something like top 10k, top 5k, top 1000. Win streaks are really like broken right now, so definitely take advantage of that. Try to go on streaks and achieve the goal you do want to do. And anyways, yeah, just peace out. Have a lovely day.